A woman is quietly abandoned when her husband leaves to find himself with his ex. No fights. No begging. Just silence. He didn't leave in a storm. No slammed doors. No raised voices. Just a quiet sentence, spoken like a fact he had rehearsed in his head for weeks. I need space. I need to find myself. He said it calmly, almost gently, as if he were asking for time, not walking away from a life we had built together. I remember nodding, not because I agreed, but because something inside me went completely still. When people expect you to beg, silence confuses them. And I was very silent. A few days later, I learned the part he didn't say out loud. The space he needed had a familiar address. His ex. The past. The version of life he once ran from and suddenly decided was worth revisiting. Funny thing is, by the time the truth reached me, I wasn't surprised. Not devastated either. Just aware. Like the final piece of a puzzle clicking into place. People imagine moments like this as dramatic. Tears on the floor. Shaking hands. Sleepless nights. But what they don't tell you is that sometimes heartbreak doesn't explode. Sometimes it sharpens. I watched him pack. Fold shirts. Check his phone. Avoid my eyes. He moved like someone already gone and I let him. No speeches. No accusations. No emotional performance to make him feel important. Because here's the truth I didn't understand back then but feel deeply now. When someone leaves you to find themselves, they've already decided you're not part of what they're looking for. And once you accept that, everything changes. The house felt different after he left. Not empty. Quieter. As if the walls themselves had exhaled. I walked through rooms we once shared and noticed things I hadn't before. The light in the mornings. The way silence can feel expensive when you stop fearing it. People checked in. Some out of concern. Some out of curiosity. Some just to confirm the story they were already telling themselves. Oh, I heard he went back to his ex. That must be so hard for you. I don't know what I'd do if that happened to me. I smiled politely and said very little. Let them assume grief had consumed me. Let them imagine me broken, frozen in place, waiting for a phone call that would never come. Because while they were busy discussing my loss, something else was happening. Something quiet. Something irreversible. I stopped living on pause. The first change wasn't dramatic. It was subtle. I stopped explaining myself. Stopped justifying my choices. Stopped shrinking my opinions to keep the peace. When you've been left, you realize how much of your energy was spent making yourself easier to keep. I reclaimed that energy. I started waking up early, not out of obligation, but intention. Mornings became mine. No negotiations. No schedules built around someone else's moods. Just quiet routines that reminded me I existed outside of anyone's approval. Then came the decisions. Small ones at first, then bigger. I changed the way I worked. Not harder, smarter. I chose projects that respected my time. People who respected my voice. I said no without apologizing, and yes, without guilt. Opportunities followed. Not because I chased them desperately, but because confidence has a way of attracting rooms you were once excluded from. Money changed too. Not overnight, but steadily. Purposefully. I learned to see it not as validation, but as freedom. Freedom to choose where I lived. How I traveled. What my days looked like. I upgraded my life without announcing it. New surroundings. New circles. Not loud, flashy ones. Elevated ones. People who didn't ask invasive questions or offer unsolicited sympathy. People who understood that dignity doesn't need an audience. There's a certain kind of luxury that has nothing to do with labels or price tags. It's the luxury of not being anxious, of not waiting for texts, of not checking who viewed your stories or wondering if you're still being talked about. That kind of luxury comes when you finally stop caring who left. And that's when the shift really happened. I didn't glow up for revenge. I didn't rebuild to prove a point. I rebuilt because I finally had the space to become who I was always postponing. The woman who makes decisions without fear. The woman who doesn't over-explain. The woman who walks into a room and doesn't need to announce her presence to be felt. Somewhere along the way, I realized something uncomfortable but liberating. I wasn't abandoned. I was released. Released from compromises that cost me myself. Released from conversations that went nowhere. Released from carrying emotional weight that was never mine alone. And yes, eventually, the silence broke. Messages that started casual. How have you been? I was just thinking about you. No apologies. No accountability. Just curiosity mixed with regret, disguised as friendliness. I didn't respond right away. Not because I was playing a game, but because I genuinely didn't feel urgency anymore. When someone exits your life and later tries to peek back in, it's rarely because they miss you. It's because they miss access. Access to your energy, your stability, your presence. And that access had been permanently revoked. By the time our paths crossed again, I was unrecognizable to him. Not physically, though I had changed, but energetically. I no longer leaned in. I didn't seek closure. I didn't ask questions. I was calm, grounded, unavailable in the most powerful way. He looked at me like someone realizing too late that the door they walked out of didn't stay open behind them. And in that moment, I felt no victory, no satisfaction, just clarity. Some people leave your life to remind you who you are when no one is choosing you but yourself. He went back to his past searching for meaning. I moved forward and built a life that didn't require anyone's permission. And that made all the difference. Time has a strange way of revealing truth without saying a word. After that encounter, life didn't slow down. It sharpened. The days became fuller, not busier. Full in a way that felt intentional. I wasn't running anymore. I was choosing. And there's a quiet confidence that grows when your life starts aligning with who you actually are, not who you were trying to be for someone else. I traveled differently now. Not to escape, not to post, not to prove. I traveled to feel grounded in unfamiliar places, to sit with my thoughts in rooms that didn't carry old memories. Airports stopped feeling lonely. They felt symbolic. Each departure reminded me that leaving isn't always loss. Sometimes it's elevation. People noticed the shift before I ever spoke about it. You seem different, they said. Calmer. More sure. I was sure. Not about everything, but about myself. The work I did began to reflect that certainty. I stopped accepting roles that asked me to dim my intelligence or soften my boundaries. I stopped negotiating my worth. When something didn't align, I walked away without dramatics. When something felt right, I committed fully. Success followed in layers. Not explosive. Sustainable. Respectable. The kind that doesn't disappear when trends change or people leave. I built systems instead of chasing validation. I invested in growth instead of appearances. And slowly, my life started to feel expensive in the ways that matter. I could rest without guilt. Enjoy without permission. Choose solitude without fear. There's a point in personal transformation that no one warns you about. A moment when you realize you've outgrown certain people, not because you're better, but because you're no longer available for the version of yourself they remember. That's when the messages started to change. They weren't curious anymore. They were uneasy. I see you everywhere lately. You've really changed. You look like you're doing very well. Compliments layered with confusion. Admiration mixed with discomfort. Because nothing unsettles people more than watching someone thrive without resentment. And then there was him. He didn't try to come back dramatically. No apologies wrapped in grand gestures. No declarations of regret. Just presence. Subtle attempts to reinsert himself into conversations, memories, shared spaces. As if proximity alone could rewrite the past. But the version of me he once knew was gone. I no longer filled silence with explanations. I no longer softened truths to make them easier to digest. I no longer made room for uncertainty disguised as nostalgia. When we spoke, it was polite, measured, final. I could see it in his eyes, the disbelief, the quiet realization that I had not waited, that I had not paused my life in his absence, that the world had continued, and I had continued with it, gracefully and without him. There's a particular kind of regret that doesn't look like sadness. It looks like recognition arriving too late. He asked questions that didn't need answers. How did you do it? Were you always this strong? Strength doesn't announce itself. It accumulates. It builds when you stop seeking reassurance and start trusting your decisions. I didn't tell him about the nights I stayed up planning my future. I didn't tell him about the fear I faced quietly. I didn't tell him about the discipline it took to rebuild my sense of self. Some stories are earned, not shared. What mattered was this: I was no longer accessible to uncertainty. I had built a life that felt solid, intentional, and self-owned. A life where peace wasn't fragile and happiness didn't depend on someone staying. People often misunderstand independence. They think it's about not needing anyone. It's not. It's about choosing connection from abundance, not fear. I still loved deeply. I still felt fully. But I no longer attached my identity to being chosen. That shift changed everything. Relationships became richer. Conversations more honest. Standards clearer. I stopped auditioning for roles in other people's lives and started casting intentionally in my own. The irony is this: when you stop trying to prove your worth, it becomes undeniable. The world responded differently to me now. Doors opened without force. Respect came without demand. Opportunities arrived through alignment, not desperation. And somewhere in that transformation, I found something far more valuable than validation. I found self-trust, the ability to sit with my choices and stand by them, the confidence to walk away from anything that asked me to betray myself, the clarity to recognize when something was complete, even if it once mattered deeply. Looking back, I see it clearly now. He didn't leave me to find himself. He left because I was outgrowing the version of life he was comfortable with. And that's not abandonment. That's divergence. I don't resent him. Resentment keeps you tied to chapters that are already closed. I thank the moment for what it revealed and release it for what it no longer serves. Because the life I built after wasn't loud. It wasn't vengeful. It wasn't performative. It was intentional. It was dignified. It was mine. And the most powerful part? I didn't need anyone to witness it for it to be real. Somewhere out there, he lives with the knowledge that he once had access to a woman who became everything he couldn't keep. And I live with something far better. Freedom, self-worth, a life designed, not defended.